Richard Anderson stepped out of the towering glass structure that had become his second home, the oppressive weight of ambition resting heavily on his shoulders. The bustling city of New York unfolded before him, a vibrant tapestry of life that he rarely paused to appreciate. Cars honked in a chaotic symphony, pedestrians hurried by, each consumed by their own agendas. Richard brushed off the noise, his mind swirling with thoughts of profit margins and potential expansions. He was a successful entrepreneur after all, and every minute spent away from work felt like a minute wasted. As he walked towards the nearby park, his tailored suit and polished shoes set him apart from the crowd. The sun cast a warm glow over the city, but Richard was oblivious to the beauty surrounding him. He was lost in a world of spreadsheets and quarterly earnings, where happiness was measured in dollar signs. It wasn't until he reached the park that he noticed a shift in the atmosphere around him. In stark contrast to the sleek lines of his corporate life, laughter rang out across the grassy expanse. Richard's gaze shifted, drawn to a small figure darting around with an infectious joy that seemed to radiate from him. There, amidst the neatly trimmed grass and well-kept paths, was a boy no older than 7. Tommy, as he would later learn, was playing with a makeshift toy car crafted from scraps, bits of wood, metal, and whatever else he could find. The boy's laughter was a melody that cut through Richard's thoughts, pulling him from his reverie. Tommy's eyes sparkled with delight as he zoomed the car along the ground, his small hands maneuvering it with surprising skill. Richard paused, watching the boy's unrestrained happiness, a stark contrast to his own carefully curated life. The boy's laughter echoed in the park, a sound so pure that it momentarily chipped away at the walls Richard had built around himself. "Hey there," Richard called out, his voice a mix of curiosity and warmth. Tommy looked up, his wide eyes reflecting an innocent surprise. "What are you playing with?" Tommy grinned, holding up the makeshift car. "It's a race car. Look at how fast it goes." He pushed it forward and it skidded to a stop, but that didn't seem to dampen his spirits. Richard felt a tug at his heart. "You know, I could buy you a brand new toy car. Something really special," he offered, a smile spreading across his face as he imagined the boy's joyful reaction. Tommy's expression shifted from excitement to confusion. He tilted his head, his brow furrowing slightly. "Why would you do that? This one is just fine." The sincerity in Tommy's voice struck Richard like a thunderbolt. It was as if the boy had reached into his soul, unearthing feelings he had long buried beneath layers of wealth and ambition. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but words failed him. He felt a strange unease wash over him, an unsettling realization that he had been so consumed by his own pursuits that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. The boy's contentment with a broken toy highlighted a stark truth about happiness that Richard had overlooked in his relentless quest for success. "Are you sure?" Richard finally managed to say, his voice softer now, almost reflective. "Yep," Tommy replied, his grin returning. "It may be broken, but it's mine. I can fix it." He bent down, picking up the toy once more, his focus shifting back to his imaginative play. Richard stood there momentarily frozen as the boy's laughter echoed in his ears. The joy radiating from Tommy was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, Richard felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost, a sense of connection to the world around him. As he turned to leave, the weight of the encounter lingered in his mind, like a ghost haunting the corridors of his thoughts. He walked away, the bustling city continuing its relentless pace around him. But within Richard, something had shifted. The exchange with Tommy had opened a door to a deeper understanding, one that he had never anticipated. And as he made his way back to his office, the boy's innocent words echoed in his mind, urging him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about happiness, purpose, and the meaning of giving. Richard Anderson walked away from the park, his mind swirling with the bewildering encounter he had just experienced. The laughter of the children echoed behind him, but all he could hear was Tommy's innocent question. "Why would you do that?" The boy's eyes had sparkled with joy over a broken toy, and Richard couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had just transpired. He paused at the street corner, leaning against the cool metal of the bus stop sign, and reflected on his own childhood. Growing up in a world where success was measured by wealth and possessions, Richard had always been taught to equate happiness with material gain. His parents had showered him with the latest gadgets and toys, but he had seldom felt the unadulterated joy that Tommy had displayed with his makeshift car. As he recalled those days, Richard's stomach twisted. He remembered the emptiness that had settled in his heart, even amidst the abundance. "Is this what it's all about?" he muttered to himself, clenching his fists. Chasing after money and status? The bright, bustling city around him faded into a blur, and he felt a strange longing for something deeper, something genuine. Meanwhile, Tommy trotted home, his heart still dancing from the encounter. He entered a small, run-down apartment, the paint chipped and the atmosphere heavy with the scent of cooking. His mother, Sarah, was stirring a pot on the stove, her brow furrowed in concentration. The moment Tommy stepped inside, her expression softened. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your day?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. "It was amazing, Mom," Tommy exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "I met a man in the park. He wanted to buy me a new toy." Sarah's brow furrowed again, this time with concern. "A man? What did he look like?" Tommy paused, considering the details. He was really big, with nice clothes and a shiny watch, but he didn't have a mean face. He just looked confused, I guess. Confused? Sarah echoed. Intrigued, she set the spoon down and knelt to meet Tommy's gaze. "What do you mean?" He asked me why I didn't want a new toy, Mom. I told him this one is just fine. Tommy smiled, recalling the moment. "But I think he didn't understand why I like it so much." Sarah felt a pang of pride mixed with worry. She knew that her son had a unique perspective on life, one shaped by their struggles. "Tommy, you're a special boy. Just remember, not everyone understands how we live." "Do you think he'll come back?" Tommy asked, his eyes lighting up with curiosity. "I don't know, baby, but if he does, be careful," she replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind his ear. "People can have different intentions." Back in the park, Richard sat on a nearby bench, his thoughts still tangled in the encounter with Tommy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass. He watched as children played, their laughter ringing out like sweet music. Yet there was something heavier in the air, a sense of unease that lingered with him. He noticed Tommy in the distance, playing with his broken toy, a look of pure joy on his face. Richard felt a strange pull, a connection that he couldn't quite articulate. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees as he observed the boy. "What is it about him that captivates me so?" he murmured almost to himself. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Richard made a decision. He couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to learn more about Tommy and his life. Something in that simple encounter had ignited a flicker of hope within him, a desire to understand what it truly meant to live. He stood up, brushing off his suit, and walked away from the park with a new sense of purpose. "Tomorrow I'll come back," he resolved quietly. "I need to figure this out." With each step he took, he felt lighter, as if the weight of his corporate life was beginning to lift, replaced by a burgeoning curiosity about the world beyond his wealth. Richard stood at the edge of the park, watching Tommy play with his makeshift toy car. The boy's laughter rang clear and bright, a stark contrast to the muted hum of the bustling city surrounding them. Richard had come to understand that this park was more than just a patch of green amid concrete. It was an escape for Tommy and his mother, a sanctuary from their struggles. He felt an unexpected weight settle on his shoulders, a burgeoning sense of responsibility for the boy and the life he led. As he made his way closer to Tommy, Richard noticed the other children playing, their shouts and cheers filling the air. The carefree joy seemed foreign to him now, a fleeting memory of a childhood he had long since buried under layers of ambition and greed. "I wonder if Tommy understands just how lucky he is," Richard thought, shaking his head. He approached the boy, who was now engrossed in a game with his friends. "Hey, Tommy," Richard called out, causing the boy to turn and beam at him with that infectious smile. "How's your day going?" "It's great," Tommy replied, his eyes sparkling. "We're racing our cars." "Want to see?" Richard crouched down, intrigued. "Absolutely. Show me what you've got." Tommy dashed to the makeshift starting line, his little friends gathering around, eager to join in. Richard found himself swept up in the moment, cheering for the boys as they pushed their creations down the makeshift track. The simple joy radiating from Tommy was contagious. and Richard couldn't help but smile. After the race, the children settled on the grass, catching their breath. Richard took a seat beside Tommy, still feeling the remnants of the happiness that had enveloped him. "You know, I've been thinking about toys." Richard began trying to gauge Tommy's reaction. "What if I brought some new ones for you and your friends next time?" Tommy's face twisted in confusion. "But I like my car. It's not broken. It just needs a little love," he replied earnestly, clutching the worn toy like a treasure. "Why would I want something new?" Richard was momentarily taken aback. The boy's innocence struck a chord within him, and he found himself grappling with the realization that Tommy valued what he had far more than mere material possessions. "I just thought you might like them," Richard stammered, feeling a wave of embarrassment. As the days passed, Richard's mind was consumed by thoughts of Tommy and his mother Sarah. He learned that the two often visited the park to escape their harsh reality, where laughter became a temporary reprieve from their struggles. A sense of responsibility began to blossom within Richard, pushing him to take action beyond mere charity. He wanted to understand their world, to make a tangible difference. Encouraged by this newfound empathy, Richard sought out local charities that focused on helping children like Tommy. He attended meetings and browsed websites, yet each attempt felt hollow. No matter how many toys he considered donating, they seemed inadequate compared to the genuine joy he had witnessed in the boys' laughter. "These toys won't change their lives," he mused, frustration gnawing at him. "What do they really need?" One afternoon, while he was researching online, he overheard Sarah speaking to a friend on the phone. "I'm grateful for the little things, but I worry," she said, her voice a mix of determination and skepticism. "Sometimes I feel like people just give to feel better about themselves, and then they forget us. I don't want to be just another line on someone's charity list." Richard's heart sank. He understood her hesitation, and he could see why she felt that way. The fear of being forgotten weighed heavily on her, and he realized he needed to approach them with genuine intention. He didn't want to be just another wealthy man trying to alleviate his conscience through donations. He decided that he would not only donate toys, but also engage with them personally. He wanted to connect with Tommy and Sarah to show that his interest was sincere. Richard contemplated how to bridge the gap between their lives. It wasn't just about toys, but about understanding their experiences and struggles. As he prepared for his next visit to the park, Richard made a promise to himself. He would listen, learn, and offer something more meaningful than material goods. He hoped that by doing so, he could help them find a sense of stability and joy beyond the confines of their circumstances. In his heart, he knew that true charity was not just about giving, but about building relationships that could transcend societal boundaries. Richard Anderson stood at the edge of the park, a bag of colorful toys slung over his shoulder. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the city, illuminating the laughter of children playing in the distance. Yet, his heart raced with uncertainty. Today, he had decided to take a step beyond his comfortable bubble of wealth and privilege to deliver toys personally to Tommy and his mother, Sarah. He hoped to create a moment of joy, but deep down, he was anxious about how they would receive him. As he walked deeper into the park, Richard spotted Tommy sitting alone on a bench. The boy was intently focused on his broken toy car, twisting the wheels and making engine noises. Richard's heart swelled at the sight. Even in solitude, Tommy radiated happiness. He approached cautiously, taking a moment to admire the boy's creativity, turning scraps into fun. "Hey there, Tommy," Richard called out, his voice a blend of excitement and nervousness. Tommy looked up, his wide eyes blinking in surprise. "Mr. Anderson," he asked, recognition sparking in his expression. Richard knelt beside him, the bag of toys resting on his lap. "I brought you something," he said, pulling out a shiny brand new toy car. Its vibrant colors gleamed in the sunlight, and Richard expected Tommy's face to light up with joy. However, Tommy simply stared at the toy, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Is this a gift or a trade? What do you want in return?" he asked, his innocent voice tinged with suspicion. Richard felt a lump form in his throat. The question struck him harder than he anticipated. He realized that for Tommy, kindness had a price, and such generosity might be perceived as a transaction rather than an act of goodwill. No, no, Richard stammered, shaking his head. It's a gift. I just want you to have it. Tommy remained silent, his gaze shifting between Richard and the toy. You don't want anything? Like, I don't owe you, right? He pressed, his young face serious, reflecting the harsh lessons life had already taught him. Richard's heart ached at the depth of Tommy's understanding. I promise you don't owe me anything, he reassured, his voice softening. I saw you playing with your other car, and it made me want to do something nice for you. Tommy's expression softened slightly, but the skepticism lingered. Just then, Sarah appeared in the distance, her eyes scanning the park until they landed on Tommy. Richard observed her approach, noting the protective instinct in her stride. As she reached them, she instinctively wrapped an arm around Tommy, pulling him close. Tommy, are you okay? She asked, her voice laced with concern. Her gaze shifted to Richard, assessing him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. What are you doing here? Richard stood, feeling suddenly exposed under her scrutiny. I brought some toys for Tommy, he explained, gesturing to the bag. I thought he might like them. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Toys? She echoed, her tone skeptical. And why would you do that? Richard took a breath, searching for the right words. I saw him playing with a broken toy, and it reminded me of... He hesitated. The joy of childhood. I wanted to share that joy. Joy? Sarah challenged, her voice firm. You think a toy can buy joy? You don't know our struggles. This isn't a game for us. Richard felt a pang of rejection at her words. I don't mean to insult you. I want to help, he replied, his sincerity evident. Tommy looked between the two adults, sensing the tension. Mom, it's just a toy, he said softly. I think it's nice. Richard watched as Sarah's expression softened at her son's words, but the weariness in her eyes remained. It's not that simple, Tommy, she said gently. We don't accept things from strangers. Richard nodded, understanding their hesitation. I respect that, he said, his voice steady. I just thought maybe this could be a small way to bring a smile. Silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken feelings. Richard gazed at Tommy, who was still eyeing the toy car, as if it were both a treasure and a burden. He realized that for Tommy and Sarah, accepting such a gift could come with complicated emotions, a reminder of their reality that was far from easy. As Richard stepped back, he felt the weight of his intentions. He didn't want to be another rich man throwing money at problems, hoping to feel good about himself. Instead, he left the park slowly, contemplating the complexities of kindness, generosity, and the very human need for connection that transcends wealth and privilege. Their world was far from his, yet he felt more connected to them than ever before. Richard stood before Tommy, the shiny toy car in his hands, feeling a strange swirl of emotions. He could see the boy's eyes darting between the toy and his face, uncertainty etched on his youthful features. I just want to make you happy, Richard blurted out, his voice tinged with embarrassment. There was a sincerity in his tone, yet he could feel the weight of his privilege pressing down on him. Tommy hesitated, his brow furrowing in deep thought. But I don't want to owe you anything, he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. The innocence in his words struck Richard like a cold wave. It was a reminder that generosity could sometimes feel more like a burden than a blessing. Look, Tommy, Richard replied, trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. I don't want anything in return. I just thought you might like it. He gestured toward the toy, hoping to convey his good intentions. Before Tommy could respond, a voice cut through the moment. Tommy, Sarah called out, rushing into the park. The protective instinct of a mother was evident in her stance as she pulled Tommy close, her eyes narrowing at Richard. Who are you? She demanded, her tone firm but wary. Richard felt a pang of rejection as he took a step back, instinctively respecting her boundaries. I'm Richard. I met Tommy the other day, he explained, trying to keep his voice calm. I wanted to give him a toy. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. And you think handing him a toy makes everything better? She questioned, her voice laced with skepticism. You don't know what it's like for us. Richard opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss. He realized that he hadn't considered the implications of his actions. I'm sorry if I offended you. He finally managed, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. Mom, it's okay, Tommy interjected, glancing between the two adults. He was just trying to be nice. The boy's innocence seemed to bridge the growing tension between them, but Sarah remained cautious. "I appreciate the gesture," she said slowly, "but kindness should come without strings attached. It's easy to give when you have everything. It's harder when you don't." Richard felt a deep sense of understanding wash over him. He had been so consumed by his desire to help that he hadn't fully grasped the complexities of their situation. "I get that," he replied quietly. "Maybe I was wrong to think I could just fix things with a toy." Sarah's expression softened just a fraction, and she studied Richard for a moment longer. "It's not about fixing, Mr. Anderson. It's about understanding. You don't know who we are just because you saw us in the park." Richard nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "You're right. I don't know you, but I want to learn. I want to understand," he said earnestly, his eyes meeting hers. "Understanding doesn't come from a distance," Sarah replied, her tone slightly less defensive. "It requires real engagement, time, and effort. It's about seeing the world through someone else's eyes." Richard swallowed hard, the truth of her statement resonating within him. He had spent so long in his corporate world, surrounded by numbers and profit margins, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. "I'd like to try," he said finally, the sincerity in his voice echoing through the quiet park. "I want to know more about you and Tommy. Maybe we can start there." Tommy, sensing the shifting dynamics, looked up at his mother with hopeful eyes. Sarah remained silent for a moment, weighing her options. "Okay," she said cautiously, "but on our terms." Richard smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As he turned to leave the park, a new determination filled him. The complexities of giving and receiving were indeed intricate. But for the first time, he felt more connected to Tommy and Sarah than to the sterile world of business he had once inhabited. In that fleeting moment, he understood that true generosity came from a place of empathy, not obligation. Richard Anderson stood in front of the ornate mirror in his penthouse, adjusting his tie with a blend of excitement and trepidation. He had spent days contemplating how he could connect with Tommy and Sarah, feeling an urgency to bridge the chasm between their lives. Today, he had invited them to a charity event he was hosting. It wasn't just any charity. This was his chance to show them that he genuinely cared, that he wanted to make a difference in their lives. As the evening unfolded, the luxurious ballroom buzzed with laughter and conversation. Chandeliers glittered above, casting warm light over elegantly dressed guests. Richard scanned the room, anticipating Tommy and Sarah's arrival. He felt a flutter of nerves. He wanted them to see him as more than just a wealthy businessman. He wanted them to understand that he was a man who had once struggled just like them. When Sarah and Tommy finally entered, Richard's heart raced. Sarah wore a simple but elegant dress that contrasted with the extravagance around her, while Tommy, looking small and a bit overwhelmed, clutched her hand tightly. Richard approached them. A wide smile plastered on his face, but he noticed the cautious glint in Sarah's eyes. "Sarah, Tommy, I'm so glad you could make it," Richard greeted, his voice warm yet edged with nervousness. "Thank you for the invitation," Sarah replied, her tone polite but guarded. "This place is impressive." Tommy's eyes widened as he took in the spectacle around him. "It's like a castle," he exclaimed, his innocence shining through. Richard chuckled, the sound breaking some of the tension. "It certainly feels that way. But I want you to know that tonight isn't just about the glitz. It's about helping kids just like you, Tommy." As the evening progressed, Richard guided them through the event, introducing them to various guests who expressed their support for the cause. But he noticed that Sarah remained skeptical, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Do you really think this will make a difference?" she asked Richard during a lull in the conversations. "I believe it can," he replied earnestly. "I wasn't always in this position, you know. I grew up in a small town, struggling to make ends meet. I understand what it's like to feel lost." Sarah's gaze softened slightly, and Richard felt a flicker of hope. "What changed for you?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "It was a combination of hard work and a little luck," Richard admitted. "But it also took people believing in me, giving me opportunities one didn't think I deserved. I want to be that person for kids like Tommy." Suddenly, Tommy stepped forward, his small frame seemingly filled with an unexpected confidence. "I have an idea," he said, looking up at Richard with earnest eyes. I've been working on a project at school. It's about helping kids who don't have toys or games to play with. Richard's heart swelled with pride and intrigue. Tell me more, Tommy, he encouraged, crouching down to the boy's level. I want to create a place where kids can come and play no matter what. A community center, maybe, where we can all share and have fun together, Tommy explained, his voice trembling with excitement. That sounds amazing, Tommy, Richard responded, genuinely impressed. How can I help you make that happen? The room seemed to fade away as the three of them stood together, a newfound partnership forming in that moment. Sarah looked at her son, then back at Richard, the weariness in her eyes replaced by a glimmer of hope. Are you serious? She asked softly, the weight of uncertainty lifting slightly. Absolutely, Richard affirmed, his conviction clear. I'd love to help fund your project and bring it to life. Kids like you deserve a place to play and feel safe. With that, they embraced, the warmth of their connection resonating through the extravagant ballroom. Surrounding them were the echoes of laughter and music. But in that moment, they created a small world of their own, one built on kindness, understanding, and the belief that they could change their community together. As they parted, there was a sense of unity and purpose, a realization that no matter their backgrounds, compassion had the power to bridge any divide. Richard, Sarah, and Tommy stood on the precipice of a new journey, one that promised to light the way for many others. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories that come out. We post every day. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who has already contributed.